Recently, I've been spending some of my free time researching and spending time working on different sorts of things related to API testing. That includes things like working with cookies and cache and stuff like that. And since I've been spending so much time working in the Web Security Academy from Portswigger, and I haven't really solved one of those in a video in a while, I figured I might as well go ahead and make a video about one of these labs that I think you guys might get some benefit from. And since this is something I see in my day job a lot, I figured it might be helpful if I go over a lab related to user enumeration and password brute forcing. I think I made a video about user enumeration a long time ago, but this is something I see constantly in all kinds of apps that I'm testing all the time, and it's a pretty big deal to have any sort of flaw in the authentication flow of an application. So let's go ahead and get started with this lab and see what we can figure out. As usual, I'm going to open the lab in a new tab, and while I'm waiting for that to load, I'm going to open up Burp Suite and start a temporary project. Once both of those finish loading, I'm going to open up a browser inside Burp Suite, and then I'm going to copy the URL from that lab and paste it into this browser. And now I have the lab open in the browser inside Burp Suite, and I'm getting that proxy traffic in my HTTP history. And just to back up for a second, the instructions for this lab say this lab is subtly vulnerable to username enumeration and password brute force attacks. It has an account with a predictable username and password, which can be found in the following word list, and they give us a very convenient word list for both usernames and passwords. In a real world scenario, you could find these kind of word lists online on all kinds of repos, like on GitHub and stuff. There are plenty out there. And it says to solve the lab, enumerate a valid username, brute force the user's password, then access their account page. So I'm going to go to my account, and I'm going to try to log in with just a random username. I'm just going to submit test as the username and password, log in, and invalid username or password. And if we go to our HTTP history, we see there's this post request that got sent when we tried to log in. And here we see our username and password in the request. And the response is a 200 OK, and it says in the body that invalid username or password. So that doesn't really tell us anything useful, but the instructions said that this application does have a predictable username. And they did give us this list of potential usernames that we can use. So I'm just going to copy this list. And if we go back to our Burp Suite and we right click this request and we send to intruder, I'm going to highlight the username and add. So now that position is where we're going to try to brute force this to enumerate users. And I'm going to paste all those usernames that I just copied from that list right here. And now normally I would just start this attack here, and then I would sort of analyze the response links and the response codes and things like that just to see if there's any differences. But they kind of gave us a hint in the title of this lab. Because the title of the lab is username enumeration via subtly different responses, I'm going to assume that it's going to be pretty difficult to see what the difference is. So I'm going to add a little bit of extra something to make sure we're finding any differences that might be there. So I'm going to go over here to the side and click settings, and I'm going to scroll down to grep extract, and I'm going to check extract the following items from responses, and I'm going to click add. And now this is going to show us that response from that request that we have in our intruder. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom where it shows that invalid username or password message. And I'm going to highlight that and click OK. So now whenever we run this intruder, we're going to be able to see whatever is in that spot in the response for every one of these requests that the intruder sends. So now I'm going to start attack. And I am using the Community Edition, so it's going to be a little bit slow here. If you were using the Burp Suite Pro version, which is the one that I would use in my day job, then it would be much faster. This would be done in like a second. But because we are using the Community Edition, it still works. It just takes a bit more time. So that took a few minutes, but it eventually finished, and now we can review the results. And because we highlighted this response message, I'm going to sort by that response and see if we can notice any differences. So when we sort by that response, we see that every single one responded with invalid username or password, but there's one that is very slightly different. And that is this one that says invalid username or password and does not have that period at the end. And that was the username auth. So this doesn't seem like much, but that very small difference tells us that this one has sort of a different workflow than the rest of them. There's something that is happening on the back end that it did something different when it saw the auth username that it didn't do for any other username you gave it. And we can sort of deduce from that information that that means auth is likely a valid username. So now if we go back to our intruder, now that we have a valid username, now we can try brute forcing the password. So I'm going to clear the payload positions, clear all, and I'm going to replace test with auth, And I'm going to put another payload position at the password field. And I'm going to go over to my payloads and I'm going to clear all those usernames. And I'm going to go back to the lab page and I'm going to go to this password list. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the username list, and I'm just going to copy this entire list. And once again, I'm just going to paste all those passwords in here. So now I have a list of 100 passwords. And this time the difference probably won't be that subtle, because if we find the correct password, it will just log us in and we'll be able to see that we were successfully logged in. And if it's the wrong password, we will not be logged in. So it shouldn't be as subtle as the last time. So I'm not going to need that little extra little setting that I did in the previous one. So I'm just going to go to the settings and I'm going to uncheck that box and I'm going to remove that. So now I'm going to start this attack and see if we can find the correct password. Once again, it is the community edition, so it's going to take a little while to finish this, but it still works. Just take some time. If you were using the Burp Suite Pro version, then this would be done in seconds. Okay, once again, that took a few minutes, but it finally finished. And now I'm going to sort by the different sort of responses. I'm going to first start with status code, and I'm just going to sort by that. And we see that we have one status code that is different than all the rest. Most of them responded with a 200, but this one responded with a 302. So let's see what this one says. If we look at the response, we see that this one says 302 found, whereas all the others gave us a 200 OK and told us that the username was invalid or the password was invalid. So that tells us that Amanda is the correct password for the username auth. So now we've enumerated users to find the correct username auth, and we've brute forced that user's password to find their password Amanda. So now we can use that information to actually log into their account. We just go back to the login page, type in auth and Amanda. Log in, your username is auth, and congratulations, you solved the lab. So none of this was that incredibly difficult, but this is a pretty important thing to be able to know how to do, because this is very common. I actually see user enumeration, password brute forcing slightly less often, but user enumeration at the very least is incredibly common in the apps that I'm testing all the time. If it's not through the actual login form, I can usually find it in either like the forgot password workflow or the new user creation workflow. There's usually some sort of enumeration vulnerability in so many of the apps that I test. A lot of them will have like rate limiting or a CAPTCHA or some sort of brute force protection that prevents actual password brute forcing. But user enumeration is still a big deal. It can still lead to attackers being able to get a full validated list of all the application or company's users, which can lead to bigger attacks like phishing campaigns and things like that. And no company wants to be the reason that their customers end up getting phished. So it's important to be able to find these kind of things and look for those subtle differences in the responses for this kind of stuff. That's going to be it for this one though. I think this might end up being a bit of a shorter video, but I hope you guys enjoyed it and got some sort of value out of it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.